top 100 rankings are flying. Where should Pacers players rank among the top 100 in the NBA? How many players should be there? 3, 4, 5, only 2? There's a lot to crack with that, and Dan Favale from Bleacher Report is going to join us to break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East, and I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, fun topic that I've grown warmer on over the years, top 100 NBA player list, ranking every player in the NBA, and I want to talk about that from a Pacers perspective. Pacers players getting ranked all over the place in these as outlets produce these kinds of lists. And the reason I think these are valuable is to get the perception of where these players fall in the rankings of the league, right? Do fans view them too highly, too lowly? What makes the most sense? Dan Favale from Bleacher Report and I cut through all that and discuss which Pacers should be ranked higher and lower, as well as who could be on these lists in future seasons. Really fun conversation. Dan's coverage of the league is absolutely second to none. Really, really fun diving into some of these lists, the big differences from them, and who could be movers in the future seasons. This episode is pre-recorded. I am on a trip, my last escape from Indy until the Pacers season starts. So if it feels like I'm dodging a news thing, that's why. But if it's a huge news thing, I'll try to get something out even on a trip. Please enjoy this conversation with Dan Favale talking top 100 players. The top 100 players in the NBA, a commonly discussed thing in the offseason. And where do Pacers players rank among them? Is that too high? Is that too low? Who could be sneaking into these discussions next year? Because one guy snuck into those discussions this year, and it's much a surprise to me. We'll cover all of that today. And who better to do that with than someone who covers the entire NBA for Bleacher Report and on the Hardwood Knocks podcast, and low-key helped me maybe more than anyone climb in this industry via being an editor for me for years. It's Dan Favale. Dan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing much better after that much too kind intro. How are you doing about yourself? I'm assuming you're teasing that Jalen Smith might have made a top 100 list.
I don't think he'll be a guy we discuss very much today. Yeah, for those who don't know, Dan, in the NBA math heydays, when it was the greatest analytics site on the internet, actually, it was competing very hard with nylon calculus. But still, Dan was my editor. Things were fantastic, and Adam Fromel. Things were fantastic, and I learned a lot about how much I repeat words and sentences, and now I'm much better about not doing that.
And
Thanks,
I
Dan.
learned how much you love the Wizards during that time.
I love the Wizards. Did I write a Wizards thing for them?
You absolutely wrote a Wizards thing.
did.
I don't remember what you definitely wrote at least one Wizards thing.
I can't remember what it was. I think I did too. I can't.
Well,
remember.
It's been really cool to see how you've carved out a career in this industry as like a powerhouse covering the Pacers and the Fever. So kudos to you. We had, or at least I specifically had, absolutely nothing to do with that. So brush those shoulders off. You did a great job.
I will not be brushing any shoulders off. Top 100 lists are fun to me. It is roughly, if you think, 5 starters on every team, there's 30 teams, like top 150 guys are all starter level players. That's not how it works because some teams suck. But top 100 is generally like good starters, valuable players. The more of them you have, the better your team is, kind of stuff. So one, it's valuable to see, like, is your team good or considered good? And two, the important thing to me is like checking myself on values of players and how they're perceived in the basketball landscape, right? Is this guy actually thought of highly? Are they thought of much lower than I expected or anticipated? Does that actually mean anything for the Pacers in real life? Probably not, because execs do their own rankings, but it is still like a good check for me. And I was surprised, and I will start with this, that Bleacher Report's top 100, 94th ranked player, Dan, was Benedict Mathurin. And it's not that I don't think Benedict Mathurin isn't good. I think Benedict Mathurin is good. And I think he will be on many top 100s during his NBA career. Right now, I'm not quite sure he's all the way there, given his rookie season. Did you think he deserves to be a top 100 right now?
I'm pretty surprised that he was in the top 100 because we know what he does really well, but there's still just a lot of questions about his passing. Is the efficiency going to come up from the perimeter for him? What is he kind of on defense, especially if you're going to be playing a lot of these guard heavier lineups where he is, is he like kind of Bruce Brown's your 3, but like it's so him being in the top 100 is overall, if we were to project forward, no, it's not surprising at all when you look at the offensive armory that he has. In year two, I did not participate in the Bleacher Report Top 100. So, but
I
that's
should have
like,
said that. Sorry. Yes.
yeah, I mean, you can get mad at me anyway. We're just a monolith. It's all every there. I adopt every single opinion that is published by the company. Uh, that is surprising to me. I don't necessarily think it's because there is a little bit of projection involved, especially when you're doing, if you include a rookie on there for sure, but if you're including a year two, maybe even a year three guy. So would it shock me or would it shock you if by the end of the season you look back and say, oh, Benedict Mathurin was one of the 100 most valuable or best players in the NBA? Framing it that way doesn't seem too outlandish.
Very true. Yeah, it's like something I've talked about a lot this summer. Like one individual skill improvement for him in terms of something that would make him fit better with Tyrese Haliburton would probably make him look top 100 very quickly, right? And he like despite his jumper not or his shots in general not being the efficient part, his effective field goal percentage wasn't spectacular because he got to the line so much. His true shooting percentage was above league average, barely. Right. So he still is like an efficient player because he gets to the line. His ISO scoring was really good as a rookie, 13th best free throw rate in the league. But the passing and the shooting were not at the level you need to play on a team that has a guy like Haliburton who can push the pace and make everybody run around and make this brilliant offense happen. And so they fit okay together. Like the Pacers net rating with them both on the floor was positive. But if he could have a couple more complementary skills like passing, like shooting, that make him more than just that kind of scorer, that would go a long way for his fit with the Pacers and to me his growth as a player to be like, okay, clearly there's a next gear to him. He should be among the top 100. He's going to be a solid starter at worst for a very long time because an efficient ISO scorer is still a valuable player, to be clear. So like I get how you could put that top 100 right now, but at the end of the year, you're right that by the end of the season, there are a lot of ways where you go, yep, this makes sense that he was there before the season. In fact, if he grows in a certain number of ways, mainly passing to me, you could go, wow, he's only 94th. What were they thinking?
Yeah, I mean, that could be something you look back on. And like the stuff that factors into it, I feel like nationally, when people talk about Benedict Mathurin, everything kind of focuses on the shooting and the lack of pass. But it's when he does other things well, where yes, he's too, and I know Caitlin Cooper has driven this home, he's too conditioned to drive. Like he's also a guard that gets to the rim. Like 30% of his shots came at the rim last year. Like that's pretty valuable to get as a guard. And so like when you're evaluating it through that lens, it's, oh, is there just something more here? And we're going to see more of a complete package. Maybe we're not, like what does Benedict Mathurin look like? That exact player last year doesn't hit the rookie wall though. Like that player's a really good player. So it's a little surprising. I wouldn't say there were some other players on these lists that floored me. They were included. I wouldn't say I was floored. I was more pleasantly surprised.
Like, so the reason I started my segue with, if all 30 teams starters were like what you started for a top 150, like Mathurin is in the best 150 players. So like, okay, is it egregious that he's in the top 100 at that point? No, but it still surprised me just given how his rookie season ended. And part of it was a rookie wall, certainly, but part of it was teams figured out like, oh, if he dribbles, he's going to shoot. Like he's going to try to get to the basket and shoot. So like the dynamics of how he was defended changed. It was a little easier for these teams, but in general, I think that I was surprised it was that high, even though I think he's a good player.
Yeah, and I think what's tough too is and this might speak to why he shouldn't be in the top 100, but also when you're talking about the top 150, the margins, once you get past like, what would you say, like the top 35 or 40 guys, maybe like they could be so razor thin that we're just quibbling, but growth isn't linear in the NBA. It's like, there's a chance that Benedict Mathurin doesn't make this monster leap as a sophomore. It's like, then there's some risk caked in there. And also you are, introducing, yes, he's going to have a more prominent role this year just by virtue of starting, you would think. But like you are adding Bruce Brown into the mix. There is stuff they have to figure out with the rest of their rotation. How does it look like if he's playing alongside Jarris Walker? So there are a lot of questions, but if you just if your efficiency comes up or you just refine what you're already good at and then scale it ahead through the entire season or most of the season where there's no wall, or if you just, and you already mentioned, if you come up with counters or you're developing honing a skill that was a weak point for you. Like even, I think the thing that would just open up his game the most is like live dribble passing would just be like absolutely monstrous for him.
Even just like the corner nearest to him, just knowing that there's someone there to kick it out to off the dribble would go a long way. Cause then like every time last year, at least from like game 30 on, the defender in the corner is just coming in because they know he's going to try to shoot, which again, he got to the line so much that it was fine, but that is definitely a skill that would make a lot of sense for him to add. Hey guys, quick little break here so I can talk to you about DoorDash. Missing the syrup for your pancakes or just ran out of your favorite coffee creamer? With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can get what you want right when you need it. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites, and now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers right to you. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or they'll make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. And if you want even more value, you can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. With easy substitutions right in the app and best-in-class customer support, DoorDash delivers groceries exactly how you want it. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use the code LOCKEDONNBA at checkout. Limited time offer and terms apply, but that's 50% off of up to $20. No minimum subtotal and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code LOCKEDONNBA. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for 50% of your first order with DoorDash. 97th ranked on the same list that Mathurin was 94th is Jaden McDaniels. I would like to publicly say that I think Jaden McDaniels is much better than Mathurin right now.
Right. Yeah, that was. I think that says more about where Jaden McDaniels is than where Benedict Mathurin is.
Oh yeah, for sure. That is not an insult to Ben Mathurin at all. Jaden McDaniels is really good.
Everyone else I saw how low he was. That was. I believe in it. That was my choice to put him there alone. Nobody else's. So.
I'm just using that list because that's the one Ben's on. Because the next player's on several top 100s. CBS, BRs. Matt Moore's over at Action Network, and that's Bruce Brown coming in at 98th for Matt Moore on CBS. He was in the 80s. I need to have the number right in front of me, but I have too many tabs open. 98th on Matt Moore's and CBS's actually, and then 88th on BR. So right at the end of the top 100, and I think this is really interesting that he grew this much, and he deserved it. I think his playoff track record proved that he is a very additive player on both ends of the court, which is what this is all about for him. Are you, what's the best way to phrase this? Are you surprised that he's not a little higher after the playoffs he had? Because I feel like two-way players who can do it in the postseason are a little better than like a back-end starter level player. But at the same time, he is sort of limited in that he doesn't have any like elite skill anywhere. He's just kind of good at a lot of stuff. So I'm curious where you personally think he should be and if that the spot he is makes sense.
I feel like you could probably ratchet him up a little higher because of, you said, like his postseason impact, knowing what a lot of what he did in the regular season, and the Nuggets kind of using him as their backup point guard is what worked a lot of the time for them in the playoffs to navigate certain minutes. I do think, though, that he has such a specific offensive skill set specifically. His defense is really scalable. He has such a specific offensive skill set that when I'm making these lists, I factor that in, is how scalable is his offense. In Indy, I think it will translate great because when you look at their spacing, but like if you can't have him on the ball to like as much as Denver was allowed to, you're kind of then reliant on, yes, there's the cutting aspect. He does that really well. He can do some screening stuff. But you then get into the realm of, it's a cliche, the jumper. And it's like he's gone through stretches through individual seasons where he's hit a good amount of his threes. Then even I think it was his in Brooklyn, he shot really well, I think, from the corners in his final year. But like we've seen that number like really be pulled back or yanked down. And so you get into the concern of, well, how specific is that specificity limited in any way? And I do think it can be. So I think you could probably push him into the top 75 for sure. But like when you're getting into like the top 50s, the 60s, like those players, I think need to have a deeper offensive bag than Bruce, or they need to be like defensive player of the year type material, which he clearly isn't.
Those are really solid starters. So Bruce Brown, the player we just saw with Denver, probably a top 75 player, right? Like he was perfect for them in every way. There's a reason he just got $22 million. Bruce Brown, like you said, the scalability part, like on the average of every single other team you could put him on, there'd be some teams, let me think of the best example, probably San Antonio would be the best example, where he would not be that helpful, right? Because the things that
Toronto,
they don't have.
What would Toronto's spacing look like with Bruce Brown?
Oh, Toronto would have been a better example than San Antonio. Dang, that was a good one. But you get what I'm saying. There are some teams where he certainly would not even be a top 100 player. based on what he could add and what he's a good player. He's still going to help those teams. Like he helped with the Pistons as a rookie. Like he's still good, but certainly just came off of maybe the best situation he'll ever have in his career. And playing next to Haliburton, he'll look good and be deserving of probably top 100-ish level. But coming out of his best fit, I'm curious where his rank will be, because I still think he fits well with the Pacers, but not as well as he did with Denver. What's that going to look like for his numbers, his role, everything? I don't even know if he'll have a career high in minutes per game this year, though. So the numbers thing might be a bad argument. Either way, I'm curious if that will impact this at all. And we'll go next year and go, oh, Denver was just a perfect fit for him, and he shouldn't be in these lists.
Yes, as my dogs go off in the background, I apologize. Reacting to
Bruce Brown's got that dog in him, Dan. That's what you're telling me, right?
Yeah, they're irate over Bruce Brown not making the top 75. But I think I don't even know what do I add to the barking, that just be. But yeah, that's a really great way to look at it, and it's how much should that matter though? Because he's on the Pacers, and so if you believe that fit makes him a top 75 or top 60 guy, like that's just is what it is. Like there are players that definitely transcend fit, and we're getting into the star tiers where their situation isn't as dependent. But like I think you could argue after maybe the top 25 to 35 guys, like we're talking about everyone might be really situationally
dependent. That's a good point. Well, but that's why I think Jaden McDaniels should be a lot higher, because I don't think he is. to return to a guy we've already talked about.
And it's interesting how sometimes guys like that feel more plug and play than a Bruce Brown, like they can be lower because they're not doing, and it always comes back to offense, because I do think collectively, and I'll throw myself in here, we undervalue defense because we don't, unless we are Caitlin Cooper and Tony East, like we're not just going to understand the intricacies of it as much. I wasn't going to loop you under the umbrella of like the ignorance that's coming from Hardwood Knocks. So I do think that's part of it.
I don't think I belong in that grouping.
Jaden McDaniels does a lot on the defensive end. And the other thing is just, how do you reconcile, okay, Bruce Brown was able to do a lot offensively for Denver, and he should be able to do a good amount in Indiana. But if he's on Toronto, or to use your example, San Antonio, or if he was on like the Clippers or something, you're not going to do as much. And like Jaden McDaniels in Minnesota, look at the offensive pecking order with Anthony Edwards, and you have Mike Conley there, and Karl-Anthony Towns is there. Maybe there's more to their game that we've seen in flickers, but we haven't seen in extensive runs. And so how do you evaluate that? And so as someone like Jaden McDaniels, whose role has been offensively repressed by design or his situation, like that becomes super hard to rank. And to circle it back to Benedict Mathurin, he does have, I do think playing next to Tyrese Haliburton is good for who phrased, was it Caitlin Cooper? I think phrased it, Tyrese Haliburton is just going to get dudes paid. So like playing next to Tyrese Haliburton is of course a boon, but the way that Benedict Mathurin can score, he's a player that might actually transcend fit in a lot of situations on offense anyway. So like, that's a player that you could see soon. Like if you look back on this season and said, Benedict Mathurin is just way more valuable than Bruce Brown, that's not shocking either. So that's what's really interesting about how you go about these lists.
Yeah. It'd be fun to do this for a trade value perspective too. I think that top 100 trade values would be something interesting too, because Mathurin would be much higher. And that's a good point. And like the other part of this is Bruce Brown's defensive fit would be great everywhere, because he can guard 3.5 positions, depending on how tall the opposing power forward is, I guess. Or
we're talking Pacers power forwards, he could defend 4 positions just flat out.
He's taller than all the he might play power forward at times on offense. So that is super valuable, and that fits anywhere, right? If you can guard the guy with the ball and guard off the ball pretty well at 4 different positions, you're going to do a lot of stuff. Speaking of guys who can guard, Dan, Myles Turner continues to be funny on these. Every year, he's always at almost the exact same tier on every single ranking. So I think everybody's kind of collectively decided where Myles Turner should be. Myles Turner, 66th on CBS. He was 70th last year. He is 57th on BR, and he is 56 on Action Network. So there's clearly a tier here just outside the top 50, and he's been there for the last 6 years, basically. If he was going to climb, last year was the year it would happen, right? The offense finally clicked. He could do stuff inside the arc. He could punish switches. He was confident, moved the ball, never a ball stopper. But the defense wasn't as good because in large part of some scheme things, but the Pacers' perimeter defense being so bad, he couldn't clean up all the mistakes that he could in the past when they had better defense. So certainly had a career year, but I think it's kind of been decided that he is about at best in that like 45 to 60 range in the league.
I'm actually thinking the last list that I was responsible for writing solo, I'm pretty sure he was like 50th or 51st or something. So
Yes.
you're right. He's just right in that.
He's always been there. I don't even have to check anymore. I just know, scroll the 50s, I'll find him somewhere.
Well, there's always like an excuse where it's, oh, we didn't see enough of what he could do on offense. Oh, he was injured. Like it's,
Yes,
and then last year you're talking about, oh, okay, like the defense kind of regressed in theory, but when you're pulled away from like your sweet spot as much as he was, like that's gonna freaking happen. So he feels like you're right. If he was gonna rise, it feels like coming into this season based off last season should have been the situation for it. I am curious how this ranking holds up because I could see it going either way, just because when you're looking at some of the fours he might play with, like if he spends a lot of time with Jarris Walker, he's going to kind of have to revert back to some of the older stuff he was doing on offense where he's not going to be as high usage or not as prominently featured.
Even with Obi. Yeah.
Yeah. With Obi as well. I think Obi, you can at least trust the shooting a little bit more. So, but maybe then his defense is just going to be better because now you do have just with Bruce Brown, more juice on the perimeter. So I don't know that. I think that feels right. Like in the 50s feels right based off the season that he had. I would say if you had him outside the top 75, that feels like way too low just for the value he brings. And he is, look, when we talk about the archetype of center, because what so often, if you're not a superstar, what you're looking for in a big man is not necessarily a specific skill set, but it has to be a skill set that can just be applied to not just every team, but all these different lineups that they're running. And I think right now, of the non-superstar centers, like there's Brooke Lopez and there's Myles Turner, and like then that's like it. Like of just like the archetype of non-superstar centers that every team would like. We're even at the point where it's okay, even the guys who are comfortable in their rim running roles, specifically like a Clint Capella or a Walker Kessler or something like that. Okay, but like no, the shooting element is just a mega big deal, and the spacing there. So I don't know how to reconcile that value either, because there are like Myles Turner fits on 30 of 30 teams.
Can I give you the poster child for why I think the shooting makes him valuable? I think after last year, everybody would take Myles Turner over Jared Allen, right?
Yeah.
2 years ago, that was not the case, but then Myles had a resurgent shooting year, and Jared Allen had a, we'll kindly say, forgetful postseason. So I think that the added elements and being able to fit better on a lot of teams, or there's some teams, like teams without shooting, for example, if they had Jared Allen as a center, they'd be so clogged up. Like they could never get anything at the rim. That's a big problem, right? Rim pressure is very important to these teams, and Myles Turner provides it himself now because he's got more moves in the paint and with his shooting. So I think that's extremely valuable. To the credit of everyone, by the way. On CBS, he did go up only 4 spots, though. On BR, he went up 14 spots. 14 from year to year. So there is some level of growth reflected in these because he did have such a good year. And playing with Tyrese, I imagine he will be still very good. But I think, like you said, it's key to note that Obi and Jarris's inclusion could at least slightly change his offensive role. So I'll be curious if he can maintain the spot that he's held so tightly for the last 6 years.
I think we need to give people bumps in these rankings if they've been in the trade rumor mill every single year that they've been in the league too, where it's like, oh, teams value them enough. Where all these teams, it was never like, it was sometimes Pacers driven, but it was all these teams want Myles Turner, and that's why Myles Turner is in the trade rumor mill. How do we bake that into his ranking? I feel like we need if you're breaking it down into like these ratings you're giving up in different categories, there needs to be like a trade appeal value part of the ranking.
Yeah, if you'd go for 2 first-round picks, you got to be higher up. Action Network has Jared Allen, to be clear, 48th, above Turner, but BR has Jared Allen 64th, below Turner. So we've hit the fun spot of like Allen's younger and might be a little better as a defender and rebounding type, but not a fit everywhere. So we'll have to reconsider this in a year. But that's kind of like the value fit proposition that we're talking about. And if either of those guys get traded this year, which I would not predict either of them do, but if they do, we might get more information on that. All right, Dan, let's get to the fun one. Mr. Tyrese Haliburton, who I think is underrated in these lists. I'm going to come in with a take right away. Matt Moore did not. Matt Moore put him where I would have put him, or closer to where I would have put him. Matt Moore on Action Network had him 17th, which is very high, right above Pascal Siakam, De'Aaron Fox, Jalen Brunson, Markkanen, James Harden, Kyrie Irving. On BR, he was in the 30s. I just accidentally clicked to my history tab instead of clicking Control H to search for his name. I'm doing a good job here today. In VR's list, Tyrese Haliburton is 33rd. He climbed from 51 last year. And in CBS, he's 23rd. Also a big climb for him there. I think he's closer to like the 20 to 25 range than in the 30s. I mean, no one ever, not last season, ever has done 20 and 10 and shot 40% from three in a season. His combination of scoring, passing, and shooting is never been seen before. And he's a good team defender. He's smart and can see stuff. And he makes everybody else way better. Their offensive rating was nearly 120 with him and Buddy Hield on the floor together. That's insane. With just him, it was about 116. He is a one-man offense and is very smart and brings his whole team together and has such a unique combination of skills that make any lineup he's a part of good. It could be him and four bad offensive players, and it would have a good offensive rating because of the skills he has. And I think that alone should vault him up very high on these lists.
I would agree with you. I would have him closer to a top 15 player than a top 35 player. And I think and this isn't to dump on any of the players in front of him, but seeing someone like
do it.
Karl Anthony Towns at 23, and the big one for me, and it's just because it's so close to Haliburton, I need to see the case of Lauri Markkanen being one spot better than Tyrese Haliburton when Lauri Markkanen offensively is much more of a play finisher than a creator for himself and others. And so I just throw out the other elements of the actual scoring, like the burden that Tyrese Haliburton has to carry on offense is so much heavier than what someone like Lauri Markkanen, or even frankly, Karl Anthony Towns has to do at this point. And so could peak Karl Anthony Towns be better than Tyrese Haliburton? Sure. But peak Karl Anthony Towns is very much a concept at this point after all these years. We've probably seen it, to be honest. So that's too low. And I think these are subjective, but that's an objective. It's a fact. He's better than the 33rd best player. It's just, he needs to be, I'll say this to be more deliberate. He needs to be inside the top 25. He spent way too much time. If he doesn't get injured, he's featured way more prominently in the all NBA discussion. So it's just in the 30s is way too low. I even think 25 would be too low. I want to make that, that's the player where it's okay. If we need to identify these are the top, he's a top 25 star in today's, where you want to put him, we could talk about he's top 25. And so once you venture outside of that, it's too low. It's just much too low.
This is not a great comp because Trae Young's a better scorer, but they have very similar skills and Tyrese Haliburton's taller and more efficient. Trae Young's ahead of him, on some of these lists. I'm like, how? What happened last year that is possible? That doesn't make sense to me.
I do think what it is there's really not, but Trae Young isn't flashier, but he's flashier with the shots. There's more flourish on the shots he's going to take, where with Tyrese Haliburton, I would say there's more flourish on the decisions that he makes. When you're kind of looking at the hit ahead passes, or just how he's already looking up the floor, before he even has the ball in his hands after a made shot. That's an interesting, I didn't go through is each player, is Tyrese Haliburton better than this? The Tyrese Haliburton versus Trae Young debate would be interesting. I would have right now Tyrese Haliburton ahead of Trae Young, just based on what we saw last season. I'm dying over here. Excuse me. You can maybe get into the debate, is the type of shot creation Trae Young brings, could that theoretically be more valuable in the playoffs? I will say that could be big for Tyrese Haliburton. When we get to see him in the playoffs and the impact he has, that's when his, fair or not, I do think he should be higher right now. I'll make it clear. We could really see his ranking skyrocket if the Pacers are in the playoffs and he just has an iconic series.
Trae made the conference finals, right? He has it on his resume forever. I mean, path be damned, he did it. So that matters, and he is a good player. I'm not trying to belittle Trae Young at all. I personally think Tyrese Haliburton is better. In fact, Dan, I don't love BPM, but it's a pretty good public stat, and Basketball Reference makes it easy to sort stuff. So let's use BPM here. What do you think Tyrese Haliburton finished last season in BPM in the NBA?
I'm going to say 19th.
The answer is 8th.
Holy crap.
The answer is 8th. It was Jokic, Embiid, Luka, Jimmy, Giannis, Steph, Shea, and then Tyrese Haliburton, right ahead of KD, Dame, AD, Donovan Mitchell, and LeBron. again, BPM is not perfect, but it's one of the best public stats to me.
Yeah, I
BPM.
mean, it's wild because he ends up missing. He's still there despite missing 26 games. Like that's impressive.
Let me check out Dunks and Threes EPM too, which is a lot of other people's favorite. In fact, maybe my current favorite public sphere one. They don't have the number ranking, but he is in the top. It looks like 15-ish, maybe 19 is exactly right. You might have that number spot on. BPM has Myles Turner 49th, which of course is about where we said makes sense. And years of data has said that the public consensus is there. Bruce Brown, who is certainly boosted because BPM stats are regular season by great playoffs, was 123rd, and Mathurin was 185th. So I think that my surprise at Mathurin's spot is correct. Thinking that Bruce's playoff performances matter is correct, and Turner is spot on, and Haliburton should be higher. Those are my takes, and advanced stats back it up.
I find it hysterical that Turner's just spot on. Like that's just we've all just like the stats, the people.
For 5 years, we've got it.
It's collectively decided like this is his sweet spot. This is where he lands.
This is at his best, like the 40th best player of the NBA and about the 50th best player of the NBA. And that's great. That is totally fine. Okay, the extra part of this conversation is a little shorter here. What guys on the Pacers, like, look, they're a young team. Some of these answers are obvious, but what guys do you foresee squeaking into this conversation in the next year or two?
So I think as much as I want to say Obi Toppin, I probably would not include him in this. Maybe that's just because I haven't seen enough of like if the Pacers are going to use Obi Toppin as a screener. That's a completely different player than I watched for 3 years in New York. If he's playing at all, that's a completely different player than I've watched for the past 3 years in New York. Jarris Walker is the big one. I was talking about this with CC. I'm not super high on him, mostly because I don't understand what he's supposed to be on offense. I think this Pacers spacing and maybe giving him some small ball 5 minutes could help him a lot there. I know a lot of people are higher on his passing. The defensive versatility alone, and just like go ahead, raising your hand.
I'm saying me, I'm higher on his passing.
So that, like, the defensive pressure and versatility that he brings, that, especially if he brings it as a rookie, that is something that can fuel sort of an instant rise. We talk about undervaluing defense, but if it comes from a rookie or a sophomore, like, remember Evan Mobley was good right out of the gate defensively. Yeah. Like, whoa, like he's going to be like better than Kevin Garnett and Kevin Durant and Giannis combined. And so like that initial impression could really fuel him. And if he is just better on offense, maybe the jumper, maybe he's hitting some standstill threes in addition to really being a driving force as a passer. Maybe it's in transition after a rebound, or maybe he's, making plays out of the short roll. I could see him reaching there. And the other one, and I might almost bet on, I wouldn't bet on this guy making it over him because I don't know what his role is going to be this year based off the makeup of the roster. Andrew Nembhard is just endlessly fascinating to me.
Got to my guy.
This is one. Just like, he's like a point guard, but like, yeah, like go ahead. He'll defend power forwards. Like that's cool. He'll do it competently. And I love that. And there's like more to his scoring arsenal, I think, than we kind of like he had. I know everyone's going to remember, I think it was the game against the Warriors where he's like hitting step backs and stuff. And that wasn't what he was doing on the reg, but like he can do, like he can run your offense. And like, I value the defense more and the malleability he has there. It wouldn't shock me to see him run up that list. And then I guess, look, somewhat topical, but like in theory, Buddy Hield could be on a list like this. If he finishes the season,
he has been in recent years or like close to them.
Yeah. So like, because of how valuable his shooting is, and he would actually be, of the three players, maybe I'm just like, well, I don't know what's happening with him in Indy, but knowing he's been coming off the bench, knowing how much he hates coming off the bench, knowing he wants out of Indiana or whatever, I might almost say like he's the least likely of the three to make the list next year. But those are like the three guys I have circled. Did I miss anybody that's obvious?
No, so the two I would have talked about the most would have been Nembhard and Obi. Obi, because I don't know what to make of this because it hasn't been often, but a lot of people point to this. When he did get starter minutes, which was not often at all, he did produce, right? So like this is Goga Batadze. I talked about this all the time, and I always cite this, and maybe this is a bad thing, but he always said when he knew how much he was going to play, or like generally knew when he was going to come in and what his role was going to be in a game, he's usually better, right? He could prepare better mentally. He could scout his opponents better. When he didn't know, or when his role was less consistent because the Pacers had a million bigs, it was harder. And that can be viewed as a negative, like that you're not always like ready to go every game. But like for some guys, I get that could be the case. And Obi Toppin, always buried behind Julius Randle and kind of a fluctuating role with Tibbs, who plays his starters a lot. Like that can be challenging. And so if he is just the starter right away with the Pacers, and he'd be playing with Haliburton, who, as we mentioned, can get guys paid, perhaps he could just look mainly offensively, but still like pretty dang good, or like a much improved player right away. Now, I don't expect that to necessarily happen. I think he'll look fine, but it's there's a not that complicated route to me where you go, oh wow, Obi Toppin was just buried in New York and is better than that. But I think Nembhard's the most likely guy that we didn't talk about today to sneak into this. Like his two-way play, his passing is really impressive. He's improved as a shooter. He's bulked up a bit. Like I think he's the one that, a year or two from now you go, wow, this guy can play. He's slower than Bruce Brown, but like similar. This guy can play three positions and guard a bunch of them and can do stuff on the ball and off the ball and fits in any lineup. Like he could sneak in as that kind of player to me very easily.
I am hoping we don't, and the Pacers play small enough to where he shouldn't, but I'm just hoping that by starting Benedict Mathurin, by having Bruce Brown, if Buddy Hield is still on this roster, TJ McConnell's floating around on this roster as well, I'm hoping his role doesn't get squeezed or like oversimplified because he was such a fun player to watch. And so like if it makes your team better, I understand it, but he feels like someone who can help drive winning. I
agree. I'll be curious how they go from him starting 60 something games and then having to figure out him starting potentially significantly way less than that. And you mentioned Jarris Walker. I suppose I should mention him. Like, I just haven't seen him play in the NBA. I have no idea what his chances.
Oh, there's rookies. I'm sure Wemby I think he was in the 60s on this list or something.
Come on. Can we, like, rookies are typically not good. Like some are, but
I go back and forth because I was inconsistent when I would do BR's list. There were some years where I was like, no rookies. And then there were some years where it was rookies. When they're like such certain, because it's like Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes were top 100 players in the league when they were rookies. Yeah, Scotty Barnes was probably not a top 100 player last year. But so it
depends if you're being more predictive or reflective too, like with your list in general.
Yeah, I always try to make it more predictive, but I do think like the easier conversation to have is just rookies should not be considered for the list, but like also it's Victor Wembanyama has been like one of the most hyped draft prospects of all time. So I get it, but it's tough when it's a guy like Jarris where it's no, we're not going to put him on this list right now, but I'm going to say, oh, could he make it like as a sophomore? And we just haven't seen anything in a real regular season NBA game. That's tough.
I think Wemby's going to win an MVP one day, but I don't think he's going to be like CBS has him ahead of Julius Randle and Tyrese Maxey. I'm like, come on, not this year.
Yeah, and the other thing is just because it's San Antonio, is he going to be playing like 23 minutes a game first year as they try to understand his body and like the durability of it? So, and that's the other part of this, by the way, too, is like, how do you value guys who are just playing a boatload?
Because that's a good thing for Buddy Hield. Yeah,
maybe Obi is super impactful. But like if he's still only playing, like how many of these guys are logging under 25 minutes a game that make the top 100 list? So, and that's like another like form of criteria that you need to consider.
Agreed. And to end my rant on rookies, this is the thing. I think the Thunder are going to be pretty good this year, but people keep saying as a part of their Thunder pitch to being a really good playoff team is they're adding Chet. Chet has never played. Rookies are not typically good. I know he's a good fit and they need the stuff he does, but like there's a chance that he's just like not ready for the NBA right away and it takes him a little bit. Like that is possible.
It's possible, but we've seen like the guys who missed their first season, Blake Griffin, really good. Ben Simmons way back when, that version of Ben Simmons. Joel Embiid missed 2 years. And also, look, if to Thunder media and fans credit, like you just watched J-Dub and even Jay Will kind of tear it up as rookies. And so you're just like, yeah,
that's true. Maybe that team.
Yeah. So I get it. But like, yeah, it's applying people you have like skill sets that you haven't actually seen in an NBA setting. Even look, Chet looked great in summer league, but like it's summer league. So I totally get the difficulty behind that. But again, looking at the Thunder, I'm like, I also kind of get it. Like I kind of understand it.
They have Shea. They're going to be fantastic either way. Yeah, see, like I could do the flip side though. I could be like, well, Chuma Okeke didn't start till his second year and he wasn't anything. He might be out of the league this year.
I will say I was pretty smitten with him back in 2021, 2022. Like the three was kind of falling and he was party crashing passing lanes. So yeah.
Yeah, he made 35% of his threes as a rookie. And I was like, oh, this guy could be interesting. And that has
so he just kind of proved your point. The inverse of your point. There you go.
I hate when I do that. I hate when I say something against myself when it actually is for myself. Dan, this was great. Thank you very much for the time. Where can people follow you and your work covering the entire NBA, including at times via Hardwood Knocks team-specific previews, every single team in the league individually?
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter if it doesn't die at Dan Favale, Favale. All my work is on Bleacher Report, so you can check that out. And if you want to just learn more or listen to more ramblings about the entire league at large, in my totally unbiased opinion, the Hardwood Knocks podcast, spelled exactly as it sounds, it was a really, really, really fun NBA podcast. So you should go check it out. We did our Pacers look ahead. Caitlin Cooper gave us, I think it was like 70 minutes. So we were just talking about the Pacers for 70 minutes. So go check that out.
Friend of the pod. We've been doing our player previews recently, so listeners are very familiar.
The first one you guys did was because it was Obi was in it. Yeah, I think maybe that was the second one, but whatever. The Obi one was just like I was enraptured by it. Like I was just like, yeah,
we picked players and she's like, I want to do Obi. I was like, okay, you can have it.
Yeah, all this when she was just like, even the number when she named how many ball screens Obi Toppin set last year in New York, I knew it was low, but I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think like a lot of those she has on the dome. Like she just knows it, which is so impressive to me.
And I've run out of adjectives and emojis to describe how great CC is. The Pacers fans are honestly, they're lucky to have you and they're lucky to have her. And it's fun to see, though, with her specifically, other fan bases like trying to recruit her to cover their team because she's so good at what she does.
I've appreciated her new crusade of like people who listen to her who don't follow the Pacers on and go, wow, I should watch this team. She always tweets them. And she's like, hey, if you talk about teams, people will in fact watch them play basketball games.
My favorite thing to do to her too is I'll like ask her the first question, but it's like, so can you give me some Myles Turner fake trades? Because she's just so over the trade.
I did do that. That is definitely her least favorite thing. I'm sure she's so psyched that the Buddy Hield thing is coming back for the season. And the storylines. Well, I'll change. Speaking of that, since that's at the end, this is bad podcasting. We're on Buddy Hield last Thursday for sure. There's a show, and this is a pre-recorded episode by at least 3 days because I'll be on a trip. So if more stuff on Buddy Hield's come out, potentially it already has on this feed. If not, last Thursday's show is for you. Dan, thank you for the time. Everybody, we'll be back tomorrow progressing as we are 1 week away from Pacers training camp, believe it or not. Lots of topics to cover still, and we'll have it all here at Locked On Pacers. Thank you all a ton for listening. We'll see you soon.